Economic development happens when money comes from outside a region into the region.
It's our job to serve people and to make their lives better.
I spend a lot of time in Garfield County, Enid in particular.
That's probably one of the hardest things, to get the good title.
Everyone deserves help.
And he's been very instrumental in trying to make this deal work out.
We're basically self-insuring 100% of the loss.
Now having a new measurement tool to make certain we're ready.
My old friend.
Some girls have even led adoption drives for local rescue agencies.
I want to try to focus on the things out of life that are positive.
City Connections begins right now.
Hello again and welcome to City Connections. I'm Steve Keim. Thank you for joining us today. It's been long overdue and it's been a long time in the making, but we've had the opportunity, or we're getting the opportunity, to sit down and talk with Dan Dillingham here on City Connections, and he has invited us to his office today. Thank you for joining us. I know you're going to enjoy today's show. Let me share just a few things about Dan before we get into the question and answer session. Dan attended Enid Public Schools and graduated from Enid High School back in 1952. And he attended the University of Colorado, graduating with a bachelor's degree in finance and economics, and that was in 1956. Following Dan's completion of his formal education, he was drafted to serve 2 years in the Finance Office, 3rd Armored Division, U.S. Army stationed in Germany. And we have a story about what his most memorable event in the Army. We'll talk about that later on, so you want to stay tuned. So upon returning to Enid, he joined his father, Tom Dillingham, and his brother, Tom Boyd Dillingham, in the family insurance business that his father founded in 1927. Upon the death of his father, Dan at age 34 and his brother at age 38 suddenly had to pick up the management of the insurance company and the ranches in Oklahoma and Colorado. And on a personal note, Dan married Kay Camp from Waukomis in 1960. So please join me and welcome Dan Dillingham to City Connections. Dan, it's always good to see you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for allowing us to be in your studio today. You're surrounded by, it definitely looks like Colorado and Oklahoma, and reminds us so much of the visit that we had with Harold Holden. So,
well, you were in good hands with Harold.
Well, before we started, let's we don't want to hold people hostage too long. Tell me your story, your favorite memory in the Army in Germany.
Well, I was in the finance office, like Steve said, and I figured, I forget how many battalions I figured their pay, and one of them was a guy named Elvis Presley, and I sent him $138 every month. And he never complained.
That's a great story. Well, let's go back to the beginning. And was insurance business always on your to-do list? Was it your dream to come home to do that after the Army?
I'd say that it wasn't something that I planned forever. I love the ranches too, but it just the way it kind of fell. And with Dad's untimely, he had emphysema and he died fairly early. It was time to step in and help my brother in the insurance business, and that's just kind of how I got there. And we both worked and flew back and forth to the ranches. Tom looked after the Colorado ranch, and I looked after the Okmulgee ranch. And that's where the airplane came in, other than we used it a lot in the insurance business too.
Let me ask you this. People have heard the Dillingham name. It's synonymous with insurance. But if you could give us just kind of a snapshot of what Dillingham Insurance is about today, because Dan, I know there will be people that maybe not be from Oklahoma or from Enid, and they're watching this interview, and they've heard the name Dillingham Insurance. But just kind of summarize what Dillingham Insurance is about today.
When Dad started the company, almost all the insurance sold was property insurance, and most of it was on barns and farm property and things of that nature. But the word public liability was just beginning to come on stage, and Dad had a hard time breaking into property insurance with, I believe when I came in, there was 80 people listed in the Enid Yellow Pages. And now there's probably less than 10. But he decided to specialize in insuring buses and long-haul trucks and some of the harder things.
Sure.
But there weren't that many people selling it either, so that was our specialty for a long time.
Dan, take us back to the beginning, just for a frame of reference so people will know that Dillingham Insurance hadn't been here just for 5 years. Let's go back to the beginning. And we're talking in the 20s, is that correct?
Right, 1927.
Okay.
Dad went to Valparaiso University and took accounting. Then when he graduated, things were really booming down in Florida, and he moved down there. And if you remember, the Depression started in 1929. So he was down there in the real estate business and liquidated and came back and started the insurance business at home where he was better known.
When I was in preparation for our visit today, you had provided me a bio that you had presented to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame group, if you will. And some of the things that I found out about you in doing research for our visit today is that you've been a pilot since 16 years old. Mm-hmm. I don't know if a lot of people know that, maybe several do, but that was news to me. So a pilot since 16. So how did this happen, and where did your interest in flying start?
Well, it started with my dad. He bought an airplane in 1938. And
that was to help you go back and forth, right?
Well, back and forth, but he used it a lot, as did my brother and I, in the insurance business too. It expanded our field, and I don't know, we just used them continually in a plane in both businesses, and it made it possible for us to do things that we never would have driven to this account, say in South Texas.
Sure.
On just a chance that we'd get in the door, but when we could fly there, and we went and usually wrote the business.
Dan, if you look at your office setting, the number of employees you have here, and you have an office in Oklahoma City, from the world's eye, they would say, well, the insurance business is doing good for Dan and his family and so forth. Explain to me how your formal education, and maybe even the Army, how did that prepare you for all the success that you've enjoyed today?
On the insurance side, just having a degree in finance helped quite a bit, because we had to look. In the insurance business, everyone doesn't, particularly businesses, they pay during the year, and we had to front that to the insurance company. So we were really almost like a bank for the first part of the coverage, but. My dad used to give me a 15-cent allowance when I was pretty small, and I did not look forward to Sunday evenings because I had to account for where I spent the 15 cents. He just brought us up that way to pay attention and spend it on the important things.
There's that accountability word again.
Right.
How about that? Well, Dan, speaking of education, again, looking at your bio, I had read that you served on the board of Phillips University. You were instrumental in establishing the campuses here in Enid for NOC and also Northwestern State University. So why is and has been your involvement in education so important? I mean, that's key, to serve on these boards, but also to bring these education entities to Enid, Oklahoma.
Well, it was important to Enid. Phillips was having a hard time at that period of time, and later as you probably know, closed down. And it's just important to a community that wants to grow and bring in industry is to have good school systems, not only at the lower stage, but to be able to keep their families together, but get a good education in a field that will help them the rest of their lives.
And access to education is so key.
It is.
I mean, education, but an education facility, if it's 600 miles away, that's not very convenient. But if it's less than, 6 miles away, that helps a great deal. Did you always just have this vision that Enid needed to have this, education background?
Well, it came out of an organization. A lot of business people and professional people here in Enid belong to Joint Industrial Foundation, and we helped get some of the laws changed that made it more compatible to the type industries we'd have here in Enid. And it's just always been, particularly the business owners here in town have always ganged together, and when City Hall called or some other group called and said, these people are looking at Enid, we wouldn't take over, but we made ourselves available to talk with them or do anything that they felt was helpful, because it's eventually what was going to help us selfishly in our business.
And Dan, I think you can find that story over and over in communities all across Oklahoma when city fathers, if you can use that term, or business leaders, civic leaders, they saw an opportunity to enhance that community. They got together, they pulled their resources and say, hey, let's make this happen. Well, everyone's pretty familiar with Dillingham Insurance, but you've had oil and gas endeavors, drilling rig company, and your ranches and cattle operations. Tell us a little bit about your drilling and rig company. Forgive me, I don't know if it's still in place today.
No,
but
it's not.
But tell us a little bit about that part of your business.
Well, at one time we insured a fairly high percent of the drilling rigs in Oklahoma because we were investing in them and saw that there weren't very many agencies that had, at that time, had studied up on what they needed. And for one thing, like blowout insurance, that can ruin a fellow who's drilling, that if they lose control of the well,
sure,
it's very expensive. And we were in one well that was like that. Fortunately, we didn't have a very big percent, but we finally found a company connected with Lloyd's of London, and we made contact with them, and we wrote a lot of that business for years.
Dan, we're coming up to our first break here in just a little bit. This is what on our questionnaire, if you will, but you have such an impressive office surrounding. And again, it's very, if I can use the word, cowboyish. It's very Western. It's very Oklahoma and just the West. What are your favorite pieces here in the office? These are Harold Holden pieces, correct?
A lot of them.
Okay.
A lot of them.
So I guess my question is, why is it decorated this way?
Well, just love it.
I thought so.
And the big office, I wanted to have someone to visit with, so I brought Freckles in.
Okay.
Who's back behind me right now.
Now, Freckles is...
he's the milk cow's calf from Colorado.
Okay. And so you still have him with you. He's here on the wall. So tell us about Freckles.
Well, as we were liquidating out in Colorado, we brought Freckles down to Okmulgee, and he lived to be 17, which is very old for a bovine animal. And but where he was so good is we were a cow-calf operation, and when we'd wean the calves, we'd put them in a pasture with Freckles, and he'd take care of them. He'd fight dogs off. He'd lead them around the ranch when they needed a different pasture. And he was just a good hand.
So Freckles was a built-in babysitter.
Yeah. When he died, we put him on the wall.
Well, I know that's quite a loss. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about Dillingham Gardens. Everybody's familiar with that in the city of Enid. So our very special guest today, Dan Dillingham, and we're at Dan's office here on West Willow in Enid, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining us on City Connections. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about what Cowboy English is and Dillingham Gardens, and we're going to do that right after this break. Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back to Dillingham Insurance. We're in the office of Dan Dillingham for our set today for City Connections. Thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the visit so far. It's been very enlightening to find out a few things about Dan Dillingham. Dan, you have modeled a life of service, and the research that I've done, and just also in the bios that I've seen and information written about you, you've served on at least 20 boards. Could be a lot more, but at least 20 boards. So where does this interest in giving back to the community, where does that come from?
Well, I don't know, just something needs to be done, and there aren't very many doing it, and just get hold of some friends who have an interest in it and donate some time, and most of them have turned out to be good for the community, and we head off into the sunlight and forget it.
And what would be, as individuals watching our visit today, Dan, what is the importance of giving back? What could you say to encourage people in their own communities, wherever they're watching this interview at? How would you encourage them to think about giving back to the community and serving?
Well, it's easy for all of us to complain, but we all need to get in there and solve the problem. It's good for the community, it's good for our families, and it brings in better things for Enid to grow.
If you go to the northern portion of North Government Springs, you will find a very pretty garden in the spring, sometimes summer, and hopefully when there's been enough water to keep the gardens going. But people are familiar with Dillingham Gardens. Can you tell us how that came to be? Because I think it's from the efforts of the Dillingham Foundation. So why a garden?
I had an older sister. She was 2 years older than my brother and 6 years older than me. And when my folks were out, ironically, closing on the first ranch out in Colorado, my grandparents were staying with us, and my sister got pneumococcal pneumonia. And unbelievably, there just wasn't any medicines in those days, and they just barely made it back while she was still alive to be with her, and Mother just have to take a break from being in the hospital room with her for a while. And at that time, it was a flower garden, and she'd take a walk over there for about 15 minutes, and it seemed to be very calming for it. And sometimes she'd invite some other people that she knew that had people in the hospital, and they enjoyed it. And when other groups here in town, Gary Brown and some of them were working hard down there on Government Springs Park to make it a more enjoyable place to go. Someone asked us about that, and we didn't participate. Well, we did in some degree, but not in a leadership role on the fabulous monuments that we have about the Cherokee Strip here in Enid. And Staking the Claim is the one there at the Gardens. And we didn't find much help on it, and so many things like that fail because they run out of givers after a while. It's no fun to keep giving and giving, so we worked on an endowment fund to go there, and it's maintained in the Enid Community Foundation. It's doing a great job for people who want to start a fund to do something good.
Well, on behalf of many, Dan, we thank you for that preservation or creation of the Dillingham Gardens, because I know it's very therapeutic for individuals, and it's great to see all the butterflies and just really all the crepe myrtles and the roses and everything. It's just a beautiful garden. And I know it's therapeutic for people to leave the hospital and to walk across the street, just to have some time to themselves and to sit in the benches and just kind of have some peace about it. So
well, that's what it was for, and it was given in memory of, the endowment fund was given in memory of Dad and Mother.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Well, you've got a laundry list, if I could say that, of awards that you received. It's very impressive. Don't have the paper's not long enough to include everything. But one that got my attention a couple years ago was your induction into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Now we're talking Kevin Durant's in that. We're talking Toby Keith, Mo Anderson, Paul Allen recently. I mean, the list goes on of Oklahomans for many, many years. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame, what do all these awards mean to you?
Well, I don't go out to do these things to
you
get
don't wear
an
your
award.
little medallion medal they give you? You don't wear that to work every day? Do we get to see that by any chance?
Well, let's see. It's at home.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
but
another day.
I enjoy it. It's getting to meet other people here. Maybe they've just moved to Enid and started a business, or I enjoy meeting them, and to do something like of worth to the community is for both parties is good, because I can think of quite a few that have continued the habit of getting involved in the community.
Well, Dan, I'm honored, and I'm certainly impressed, because when you go to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame website and you see all the individuals that are listed in that, that's who's who in Oklahoma. And you look at all these individuals that have truly made a difference, and they've left a legacy of really making a difference. So again, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And that's very impressive. Well, in the bio I read in preparation for today's meeting, it says that your family is your greatest legacy, and you remind family that work hard, do what is right, and speak in cowboy English. Now, I got the work hard and do what is right stuff. I think I've heard that before. But the speak in cowboy English, you're going to have to educate me on what is that.
Well, too many people just speak in baloney. I mean, they don't know what they're saying, but they say it over a long period of time. And cowboy English is get to the point, be accurate, and then give someone else a chance to reply.
Now, Dan, you're dating yourself, because when you say they just speaking baloney, I do know what that means, but I don't think a younger generation knows. So there's a few of us that know what you mean.
Give them a challenge and let them figure it out.
Yeah, let them figure it out. In other words, get to the point. Well, listen, we've had a great visit today. You've been very gracious and accommodating. I feel like we just barely opened the book on what Dan Dillingham and his family and what your family has done in the community. But our last question focuses really about giving back. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Paul Allen and also Lou Ward and ask them the same question. And this is it, Dan. What advice would you have for young people that want to be successful, they want to be prosperous, they want to make a difference in life? And what is your advice to the young person that is watching this interview? What would you tell them?
Get involved. First, you have to do that. And don't try to take over. Learn from those who've been working at it, and you're just coming in. But hopefully you can be with a group that takes over in the future and keep some of these great things that have been started going. One of the things that, going back to the ranches, I remember someone asked Dad why he bought the ranches. And he said he wanted to teach his sons how to work. And on a farm or a ranch, you do that. And unfortunately for young people today, there are a lot of federal laws that keep them from being able to learn to work. But I'd urge them that there's always good jobs, and if you do it with the right spirit, it will pay great dividends to you on down the road.
Dan, one of my life's lessons is that hay hauling is character building.
Yes.
Right? So I guess your recommendation to young people is what you said to your family. Work hard, do what is right, and most importantly, speak in cowboy English, right?
Right.
Get that. Dan Dillingham, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for coming out.
Oh, you're welcome. So, and thank you for
the
joining
eyes
us.
Over there.
Thank you for joining us on City Connections. I hope you've enjoyed our visit today. It's a real treat and honor to visit with individuals here in Enid, Oklahoma that has truly made a difference, and they continue to make a difference. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on City Connections.